Okay, so here we go. Let us create a full stack application with the MERN stack. So here are the steps I use to get started. First, I'm using a virtual machine, and I installed Linux, Ubuntu 22 specifically. Then I installed Visual Studio Code, Chrome, and Postman. You actually don't need to install Chrome. You can just use Firefox, which is automatically part of the Ubuntu distribution. And from a command line, I installed node and npm, and I used these things to install it, and then these commands to make sure everything was up to date. I also installed NodeMan because NodeMan will restart the server when you make changes. So all of this was my initial setup, and obviously I didn't want to do it right now because it takes a long time. You just sort of wait around and wait around. Okay, so now that the preliminary setup stuff is over, let's go ahead and get started. So here's my virtual machine. I'm going to open up a command line here. Say make dir cards, cd cards. Okay, that should be pretty easy to do for everybody. In years past, I was using Create React App, which I believe by now has been deprecated. So instead, we're going to use Vite or Vite, however you want to say it. And so I'm going to use this to do that. And what it's going to do, it will actually go through and create a React app for you, just sort of the Hello World React app. When it runs, you want to go ahead and tell it what you're using. And for us, that's going to be React. And we're going to go ahead and use TypeScript, which I told you was required. Okay, so now it's done. It goes really fast. I don't know if you ever remember using the Create React app. That was actually took a long time. If I do an ls, you can see the front end folder. If I go up here, you can actually open it up. Cards, front end, you can see the actual hierarchy. Okay, so in the Getting Started document, you'll see instructions for continuing on. First, you want a CD front end. You want to do npm install, and what that does is it takes everything in the package.json file and installs it. So this is automatically a way to install all necessary libraries. And then you do a run, npm run dev, which actually runs the development server. And finally, to have access to that, in a browser, you run localhost :5173. Okay, so let's go ahead and do those steps. CD, front end, and that's the hierarchy that I'd shown you in the File Explorer. So now I'm going to say npm install, which is going to go through and install all the libraries that you need to just get started with this Hello World app. And I'm going to pause right now because sometimes this takes a bit. Okay, so everything's been installed, and I'm going to go ahead and say npm run dev. Oops, npm run dev, and that will run the development server, and really that's all there is to it. And then you go ahead and open up a browser, and I should have Chrome installed. Here again, you can use Firefox if you want. Okay, so here we have it, and this is that Hello World application I was telling you that it would create. Okay, so here's the Word document, and one thing I want to tell you in the Word document is that you don't even need me, or you don't even need this video. If you just follow this through step by step, then that's all you need to do. You'll get to the same place as we get to at the end of this video. Okay, so I've created a new terminal window here, and I'm going to go ahead and run Visual Studio Code, which I have already installed. Remember at the very beginning of the Getting Started document, I told you to install Visual Studio Code. Okay, so from inside of the front end directory, if you just do an ls, you should see an src directory. And I'm going to say cd src. And now I'm going to make two directories, one for my pages and one for my components. And that's the beauty of React, is it's all component and page based. So mkdir components, mkdir pages. And now we're going to go ahead and use Visual Studio and go ahead and create our first UI edit for that Hello World application, which is still running, I believe. Yes, it is. So what we're going to do is add two components. One is the page title and one is the login component. And then we're going to add another page, a single page called login page. Notice they all have a .tsx. It means that they're written in TypeScript. So now you'll see the page hierarchy has changed, the file hierarchy inside of Visual Studio. And if I go over here to Visual Studio, see I've got login, page title, and login page. These are all written with TypeScript. So if we take a look at what I've got, let's look at the login page. There isn't much to it. I'm saying I'm going to use page title. This is kind of like an include or a using or whatever. I'm going to use login.tsx. So those are the components I'm going to use. And really, this is called JSX. So it looks like HTML. And it's a lot like HTML. But all you want to do is return that, and it will make your page work. And here again, I'm including the two components that I created. Lastly, you have to export that. So now I'm back in the Word document, and I just want to take a slightly closer look at that JSX so that all of these components and pages will have JSX. Here's my page title, and all I'm doing here is returning a single piece of HTML code. It's the title. It says COP 4331 MERN stack demo. That's the easiest, about as easy as you can get. And here's my login. Notice that above the return is normally where I'm going to put all my JavaScript code. And so this is just a single function, do login, and it puts up an alert that says do it. I never like to have a button in my HTML or JSX that doesn't do something. So I'm always in the habit of, if there's a button, it does something. And here all it does is put up this alert box. Okay, let's sort of dissect this. JSX starts and ends with a div. That's actually kind of a throwback. It doesn't really have to start and end with a div anymore, but I still do it because I'm in the habit of it. Okay, so here's my please log in. Here's my actual login input, password, and here's the submit button, which you'll notice has a call to this do login. Okay, and here's a span for any messages I want to put up. Now my login page is about as simple as it can be. I say, okay, I need these two components and put them there and there. The last thing I actually did was app.tsx2, which really doesn't do much. All it does is say show this page. And the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and run this. I don't like to go too far making changes before I go ahead and test. Now the browser is already running, so what I should do is be able to go to my browser and see the change being made. The changes actually happen in real time dynamically, and so I should be able to see it running what I just created. Right, COP 4331 MERN stack demo, and so far it's not responding to my these input fields, but if I click this do it button, you'll see I always am in the habit of putting up an alert box or something, so you know you click something. So anyway, that's our first UI change, and now we shall move on. So there is an API that goes with this project, thus the term full stack application. And what we're going to do is put that into a file called server.js. And server.js will go in the cards folder, not in the front end folder. There are other ways to organize your hierarchy, but this is the way I'm suggesting you do it. And this is the actual code that we put in there. This is requiring the Express, which is what manages the API, body parser, and this is what you're going to love, cores. So we actually are importing a cores library that is going to help mitigate those nasty cores errors that some of you got for the last project. This is blah, blah, blah. The last thing it does, it listens on port 5000. Okay, and what we're going to add to the package.json. Package.json actually is what tells it all the specifics. There's no code in here, but it tells it what to do, what you're including, like down here, and so forth. So in the root of the MERN app directory, I need to install a bunch of stuff, the libraries and so forth. Okay, so let me go ahead and do all of that right now. And I've got a handy dandy cheat script here. That does all this for me so that I don't have to stand in front of a class and mess it up. So here it's installing everything and doing all the copies I need and creating all the files I need. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this because sometimes this takes a while. Okay, so everything is installed. Let me quickly go to Visual Studio. The nice thing about Visual Studio is it picks up changes in real time. So here you'll see something called server.js and you see something called package.json, and then this gets automatically created. And it went ahead and installed the node modules that it needed. Alright, so package.json, like I said, is mostly configuration information, and what's really important is it keeps track of what libraries you have installed. Alright, server.js, it's exactly what I showed you in the Word document. These are like includes or whatever. Go ahead and create an express and cores and body parser instances, and this is just what maintains the traffic in and out. So this really hasn't done a lot, but notice that the server has to keep listening. So I want to point out that I have a window I'm going to go ahead and use. I'm going to say npm start, and this is the server window. At the same time, I still have a front end window. Oops, I still have the front end window that is running. So in order for this application to work correctly, you have to have the back end running, the server end, and the front end running. Okay. Okay, so I do have a note here that reminds you that you need to have both the front end running and the server end running. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the front end additions. We're going to have a component that shows you the logged in name. Right now it's not going to do a whole lot except for put up an alert. And here's that JSX that we've been talking about. It has a span for the username and then a button for logging out. And I have a do log out function here that gets called here. And so this whole application is about baseball cards. So we have a card UI, and one is to add a card to the database. One is to search cards in the database. And the JSX is a bit more complex because it does more. Here are the surrounding divs. I go ahead and I have the input for the card to search for, a button, and notice for these two methods, true to my form, I went ahead and added some sort of alert so you know you clicked on the button. Then another span here for the results of that. And here's the input for whatever card you want to add, and the button for that. And finally, some sort of a message here. Okay. And the last part of this is the actual, so those are two components. But now I've got the page itself, which really the pages, once you get the components done, the pages are fairly simple. So I'm going to use these three components. And the way you put it together is like that, which is similar to the login page, although the login page only had two components. And I have to edit this app.tsx. So instead of showing the login page, it's just going to show the card page. Now what we want to do is test this. Remember, we don't want to go too far without testing, or you might get really way off. So let's first take a look in Visual Studio. Here I've got card UI.tsx, logged in name.tsx. All right, we already saw login. There it's all page title. Here's my card page. And I believe if I leave that there, it will probably not compile. So you'll notice that TypeScript is really, really picky about everything, and this looks okay, except this will probably give me an error. Let me go ahead and comment that out. That'll probably give me an error too. And up here in card UI, let me get rid of that. That'll give me an error. And logged in name, that'll give me an error. Okay, I apologize for that. Okay, so if we go to our browser, it should show this newly edited app running, and sure enough it does. This is the card page. We'll talk about toggling between the two pages and how to navigate shortly, but for right now it's just a single page application. Okay, so now to the routing. The first thing you need to do is install React Router DOM. It's a library. Make sure you're in the front end folder when you do that, otherwise you're hosed. So I have a few imports from that, and these imports I already had in app.tsx, so that's nothing new. And inside of my return, the JSX, I use this router, then routes, and then for each route I want to support, I go ahead and add it here. So you can have as many as you want. Now when the web app is running, I can do this. I can just come up here and say /cards, and it will vector to that. And if I say just root, it'll go back. So basically, now you're supporting multiple pages, so you have a multiple page web app. So now we're going to turn our attention to data persistence. Before, when we got data out of the user interface, we just used that document.getElement by ID thing. But here it's a little bit more complicated because those JavaScript functions are no longer available in React. So let me just show you inside of login. This is kind of the modern way of declaring a variable that you're going to use inside of a user interface. Okay. You can still do, say like let var variable equals blah blah whatever. Anyway, that was really bad. But this is the way you're going to declare them if you're going to use them within the UI. And then in order to service that within the JSX, so this is the JavaScript above the JSX, and this is going to be the JSX. And how this gets changed is like this. You say onChange equals, and then you have to have some sort of a function to handle the change message. Same thing here for password. Okay, and this is going to be the same as we had before, just about. We have a message for, we have a span for some whatever message you want to put up. And here are the two update functions. And you just do this, and since it's TypeScript, we have to tell it that there's some type, which is going to be any, because we don't really care. And then you just go ahead and set it into this. So this is the actual setter function, set login name. These are actually the setters. These are going to be consts, so you won't be able to directly, they're read-only, so you can't directly change them. All right. So inside of the do login function, we're going to do this. We're going to say do login, and then we're just going to put up an alert to show what the login and password that we got. Okay, so here I am in my source code for login, and here you can see that those are those three declarations that I have. And now here's my do login function, where it's showing me whatever they typed in for their login and password. And here are those two update functions. And the only thing that changed here is the onChange there, and onChange here, and the onClick is the same thing, okay? And this is going to be for any kind of messages I want to put up. I went ahead and used this also. I put the login and password inside of that set message thing. Okay, so here I have my login page, and I'm going to type the most famous credentials in the entire world. I hit do it, and it should put up that alert, and also it should, well, I need a big deal. Okay, so that's that working. Okay, so here's my card UI page, and I've got these variables that I'm going to use for UI. Here's my add card, and all I do is put up an alert. Here's my search card. All I'm going to do is put up an alert. And here are the change handling functions. And my JSX, the only thing I really changed is the onChange and give it that handler function there and there. So this is also pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So let's say red, blue. These are independent, I know, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's how we have persistent data and get stuff out of the user interface. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add our API. We're not going to hit the database, we're going to kind of fake it at first. We just want to make sure we have a working API, and we're going to put this code into server.js. So I'm going to do a copy and paste. And here are my endpoints, and let me go ahead and paste them in first, and then I'll explain it to you. Go to Visual Studio, paste it in. I've got some extracurricular stuff there. I think I had here we go, get rid of this. Okay, so let me just explain what we have. First thing, I have this array with all these baseball players. So this is a baseball card app. And I've got 3 endpoints. And so I've got the API/API/add card endpoint. Okay. And I always return an error, as you know, even if it's a blank error. And this is what actually goes to the JSON, cracks the JSON and puts it into this user ID and card variables. And really, this is just temporary, this local. I'm not going to the database or anything, but I'm just pushing whatever the value is onto that list. Okay, here's my login. Here again, get the data out of the JSON. And obviously this is all fake. I'm just making sure I have Rick L and COP4331. Finally, search cards. I'm just searching through that. I'm just searching through that list. Okay, so that's all I've done here. And now I'm going to save this. Oops. This npm start. Now my backend is running. And by the way, if you made a typo or syntax error, you'd see it right here because it wouldn't compile and run. Okay, so now I'm going to test this with Postman. Remember, you want to always test your API endpoints with Postman before you turn it over to the front end. Okay, so I set my URL, and it's localhost :5173/API/login. And don't forget, you have to set this to post. And now let's go to our headers and set content type, JSON. And I'm going to go to body, raw, and then I just need to format my JSON login. Just remember how important the capitalization is. So I'm going to hit send, and I got a 404. And the reason is because I mistakenly said 5173 when it should have been 5,000, and I'm going to show you why it should have been 5,000. Okay, so let me hit the send button, and there I get the response back. The reason that it needs to be 5,000 is you just have to go down here, and that's where the API is listening on. Okay, so I made a mistake there. Anyway, so that's how to test that API. Let me go ahead and do the search and add. Okay, here I have search cards, and I just put an A there, so everything with an A it matched. And the last one I'm going to test is going to be add card. And so if I run that, it returns an empty error string, meaning that there was no error. So now I've got my endpoints done, and I've tested them with Postman. All right, now what we need to do, we need to get the front end to talk to the back end. So in order to do this, here's my do login. So all that other stuff with the alert box doesn't really work. Here what I'm doing is I'm creating a JavaScript object, and I'm stringifying it, turning it into a string, which you should remember from the small project. And this is actually doing the remote access, so fetch. There are other ways to do it. In fact, in a couple of weeks I'll be talking about Axios as an alternative, but go ahead and use the fetch. I use it all the time anyway. Even though it's fairly old, but it still works. Okay, and this is going to get the response back. Now what this is going to do, it's going to go ahead and parse the response. And all this does is check to see if I have an ID of less than or equal to 0, which means my login failed. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and save all this information to local storage, so I have the name and stuff and user ID later. And I remember the LAMP project, we saved it into a cookie. This is actually a bit easier, so it's saving it into local storage. I clear the message, although I don't really need to do that, and I go ahead here and redirect to the cards page. So that's all I had to do there. Now for the card UI, all I do, there's other stuff here. This is actually, remember that stuff I just saved to local storage? Well, this is pulling this stuff out of local storage. Okay, so you can use it. And here's add card, create a JavaScript object, stringify it, and here's the actual fetch that contacts the API endpoint, parse the response, and obviously the only thing here that I might get is going to be an error, either an error or no error. Finally, search card, create the JavaScript object, stringify it, call fetch here, parse it. Now this is a little more difficult because this is a you'll probably get, well, you will get an array of some sort. Okay, so this is actually how it works and how it looks. Okay, so far. Now what we have done so far will actually work. As long as you have the server part running and the front end part working, then the front end will talk to the server, will talk to the API endpoints that are part of the server. But the only thing we haven't done is gone to MongoDB. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my account. So here's MongoDB, here's my dashboard. One of the things you need to realize is we don't really talk about tables anymore, we talk about collections. So if I say browse collections, then I can see I have COP 4331 cards, and I have a cards collection and a users collection. Now before I even get there too far, I want to go to security, or actually network access. And what you need to do to make sure that you can access this, set the IP address, the allowable IP address, to zeros. If you don't do that, you won't be able to connect. So anyway, make sure you do that. Now back to my collections. Here's my users collection. I just have 4 users. And my cards collection, I should have all those baseball players here. So it's really not too hard to use MongoDB. It's actually pretty easy. And I would suggest that you're going to have one person using it and the rest of your team doesn't really need to. I'd suggest having only one person have access to it. So now to use it, I just have to add some code to server.js. And right now we have, here's the actual connection. Oh gosh, I should have told you how to find your connection string. So under here, when you go to collections, in order to get your connect string, you click here on connect, and it will just, under drivers, you'll just go ahead and click there, and it will have your particular connection string right here. And the only thing you have to do is fill in your password. Okay, so back to the code now. So here's how I actually now connect to MongoDB. And I'll do that. So now I'm connected. And I put that towards the top of server.js before all the API. Now, the API, what I had before on the login was I had a big phony thing. Now what I actually do, I actually go ahead and I connect to the database. And here I make the database connection. And finally search card, make the database connection. I had forgotten this. You have to put that inside of ClientDB. And this should do a case insensitive search. So that's all you need to do to connect that to MongoDB. And it actually works. I'll go ahead and do an A there, search. Of course, everybody's, and I hear the darkest secret, okay? Anyway, I've had a lot of people add funny things. So anyway, that's it for this full stack application.